Hey everyone, welcome to Legends and More, the podcast. I'm your host, Luke Legende. Today I have a very handsome and wonderful comedian. His name is James Avery. James, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you for having me.
How are you today?
I'm really good. I work for a coffee company with a mermaid on it. And I just got done doing that, and that's like one of the things I like to do. Yeah, it's been a really peaceful day, really, for the most part.
So you do a lot of stand-up comedy. How did you get into stand-up comedy?
Uh, wow. Well, honestly, it's so cliche of an answer. I had a lot of people who were just telling me I was funny and I should try that. And then I did like a type five at an open mic at a comedy club that doesn't exist anymore. Well, I guess it kind of does. It just got so Joker's Broad Ripple doesn't exist anymore, but I did it there. And it was just really like one of the best feelings in the world because I had a really great first set, and not everybody gets to say that, but I was like really focused on it because I knew my friends were gonna come. And after that, I was like just bitten, and then I've just been like really going at that for a while.
Nice. And when somebody comes to a James Avery show, what kind of jokes can they expect to get?
Um, I like to think my comedy kind of goes in this structure. Like my first 5 minutes is making friends, and then like the next like 10 are like my little like tiny biography I've squeezed in there, and then like usually the last 5 to 10 are usually my like either kind of like shystery jokes where I'm talking about pranks I've pulled, or like that's where you learn a little more about my sex life or my opinion of other people's sex lives. Um, it's just kind of that. I like to think it's very informative, though, my sets.
Sure. So when you talk about your biography, so you are a trans man.
Mhm.
So how do you think that being trans has shaped your experience in the comedy world?
Well, first of all, I have to have like the side part where I say the Indianapolis comedy community is like amazing because that was like the first place I came out was in stand up, and then it turned into like I don't know, it became easy to be myself because everyone in that community like really latched on to me. Because I started out when I started doing comedy, I was just a little butch lesbian. Um, and then I changed my pronouns on stage, didn't tell anyone ahead of time, and everyone came up to me after being like, "Oh, I had no idea." Da da da. I'm like, "Oh no, I'm just telling people now," and it was just really easy, and people just I don't know. It's funny because there's so many comedians who are like, if somebody messes with you in the bathroom, like I'm gonna get them, and I'm like, I know, I'm not even worried about
So did you come out on stage before you came out to your family?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's like way easier
Really?
to do stuff on stage than it is like with people who are personally. And it was at like an open mic. It wasn't like, like a featured set at Helium. It was like at an open mic where I was surrounded by like a lot of my friends. But I had like a really frustrating weekend. I was a server at like it's like a chain family restaurant, and I hated it. And it was like right after Mother's Day, which is like hell in the industry. So I come home and I didn't want to tell them, but I had to tell somebody. So I just told a whole room full of people. And I had like kind of changed how I was dressing and my hair and all that by then. So I don't think it surprised people. Yeah, I definitely was just like, I'm just going to get this out of the way.
So when did you end up telling your family?
Let's see. I officially came out to like friends and comedians at like 27. I don't think I told my family till I was probably 28. Because I really wanted to like grow into myself a little more so I could speak confidently to like this is the decision I want to make, and like these are all the benefits that I've had since I started transitioning. And I had started, so I did a bad thing. So before I started testosterone, I started steroids because I had heard from some trans men on some sites like, well, if you really want to like get a jump start, and I'm like, I definitely want a jump start. So, and I don't recommend that because it's not safe. And there's a lot of other things that can happen, but I also like only your body changes, nothing else changes, like your voice doesn't or anything like that. And like and it made me moody, moodier than testosterone does. So like it was really bad all around. But that's how I started. And then like when I finally got on T, I felt like a lot more of like myself inside me. And then it was a lot easier to talk to my family about.
It's just funny to think about you being moody because you're so bubbly and sweet, and it's just really funny to think about you being moody. Um, So with your whole process, can I ask about your transition process?
Yeah.
What was the point in your life where you knew that it was time? Like what happened emotionally?
Oh, so I should say this. I wanted my chest off before I knew I was a trans man. Like, I started growing boobs at age 12, and I said, by my 30th birthday, I will not have boobs anymore. And I had said that, like, you can ask, like, my childhood friends. I have a few of them are still around, and they would tell you the same thing. Like, I was not gonna keep those. So, like, that, when I had, figured it all out, I was like, oh, that's like a step I have to take now. So that's not even like, up to question. And then, so I had my top surgery in 2020, and
Oh
I
wow.
had, yeah, and yeah, no, so it got postponed a ton. Originally supposed to happen in the beginning of the year at June. Obviously, elective
COVID.
surgeries, yeah, elective surgeries were just not going on at the time. That's considered elective, just, nationwide. So, and I was at the Cleveland Clinic, and they were obviously like a hub for like treatment and all of that too. And obviously like even research on it. So it was like, it took me until October to get in with the surgeon. And then it all happened very, very quickly. So October 1st, I had my surgery, and I had just had my pre-op like the week before.
Oh
And it
wow.
was,
That is
yeah,
fast.
yeah, absolutely. Like, they got me in, and then they got me in again. And then, yeah, and I woke up like the next, well, and you're on like some fun pain meds. And I woke up the next day, and I was just like, I couldn't stop doing this. Like, the nurse would come by, and I would just be like, and she'd be like, she's like, "Are you okay? Are you in pain?" I'm like, "Yeah, I've just always wanted to do this." Like, it's so different being able to like put your hand to your chest when you've thought about it like your whole life, you know. And I did. I was able to like do that, and it was.
So you said the phrase when you figured it all out.
Mhm.
What when you were younger, I mean, I know you said that you always just, you did not want your boobs, but what were the feelings? Because obviously I'm not a trans person, so I will never know the process that happens. But what is like the feeling before you figure it out? Is there what is there involved?
So like, well, first of all, growing up in just a very binary world was obviously very complicated in the
Yeah.
90s. So like, but I grew up with two brothers, so it was kind of easy for me to get away with being myself with them because they just wanted me to play their games anyway. And also we had a lot of overlapping interests because I'm a boy. But the other side of that was it was hard to communicate that like I'm not comfortable and I don't know why I'm not comfortable. I'm doing all the things and I'm trying my best, but it's like there just seems to be this unspoken expectation I'm never meeting as a person. And it was a lot of gender norms that are just kind of these like really like I want to almost say like micro behaviors of ours that I just didn't have. Like I mean, not to jump on like the microaggression circuit because I don't think it's like that severe. I just think that like there's something that people expect you to behave a certain way because you're a woman or born female or and I didn't didn't care, didn't want it, didn't like know how to explain that to people. And then they're like, well, you have to do this because of this. And I was from a kind of traditional family. So it was also hard to be like explain to them without because the language wasn't even around when I was a kid. Like I'm sure it
Oh,
existed,
right.
but it
Right.
wasn't like I was hearing the word transgender, trans man, hormone replacement therapy, top surgery. Those weren't words for me until I saw the show L Word with the guy Max. And that was like a really, and he kind of had like a rough storyline, and I'm like, well, I don't relate to that. But then like as I like grew older and then like trans man became like an actual like, well, I don't want to call it a label, but that's like a like an identity. And
Sure.
I
Well, I
and then
mean,
I
we all
re
have identities.
yeah, like and so I saw that and I was like, oh, I that makes sense to me. And then also it made sense why like being a lesbian wasn't working because not that like it was any of my partner's fault, but they wanted to date a woman and I just was not that.
No, when I was younger, I always knew that I was gay. Always. Like it was never a question. It was from the first memory I have. It was like, oh, I like boys, right?
Hmm.
But I knew back in the early 90s that that wasn't something that was talked about. And it's weird because I didn't have a traditional family. My parents are very, very liberal, but it was still something that as a 5 year old, I knew intrinsically, I cannot say this out loud. Like, this
Hmm.
is wrong to some people. This is, and it's not that I thought that I was wrong, it's that I knew that I was different, and I knew that other people saw different as bad. And I think that's a really heavy concept and really advanced for a 5 year old to know, but
Yeah.
I just knew it. It was like intrinsic. Have you always had that intrinsic feeling of like, I know that something is different, but I can't say what it is out loud to other people?
Well, I did say it out loud to people because so I got in trouble this one day on my way home from preschool. This is like James lore. I was on my way home from preschool, and the teacher had told my mom that I had told the whole class I was going to be a boy, and my name was going to be Brian. I don't know why Brian, but I was like, well, I'm going to be a boy, and my name's going to be Brian. And then like I had gotten in a fight with someone because they were like, well, you can't be a boy, and I was like, well, my dad said I could be whatever I want, and I had decided, oh, that means I can be a boy. And so yeah, and so she was really embarrassed by that. And so I got this like talking to that, like, you don't say that to people. You don't say you're gonna be a boy, you're not gonna be a boy, you're gonna grow up to be a young woman, da 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 da. And that horrified me. I remember I was sitting on the toilet when we got home, and I'm like, I don't want to grow up then. I don't want to do that. I don't want to look like a woman. I don't want to look like my mom. I don't look like my grandma. I don't want to look like a boy. I don't want to look like a woman. I want to look like a boy. I want to look like my dad, which I do now. It's so funny. My mom sent a photo next to me of like my dad when he was in the military with like really thick glasses next to me with my new glasses. And it's like, it's nice because like as a kid, I was like horrified to grow up. And then I'm like, 5-year-old me would be just fine if he knew it turns out fine, you
Oh
know?
yeah, absolutely. I also think that you and I are at this weird certain age where back in the 90s, it was this weird in between world where it's like
Mhm.
progression was happening, but it was also gay rights were very hush hush. We don't talk about that kind of
Mhm.
thing. And so we were in this weird window where it's like we could see that it might be okay, but we're still kind of villainized. And so I definitely lived in this limbo of, I mean, how do you tell a kid from the 80s or 90s, like, everything's going to be great when you grow up, when you're gay or trans? And it's like, it's a very weird experience.
Oh yeah.
So, you said that your family was traditional. How did they take your coming out?
Coming out trans was a lot easier than coming out gay. I know that sounds
Okay.
weird, but like when I came out that I liked women, that was still like, okay, so obviously we're talking like maybe a 6-year gap between these two events. Oh, that's a lie, 8 years. Because I was 22 when I told them, and I was 28 when I told them again, right? But they like, I don't know, they were still grabbing on to gay people just being more out in the world, like the early 2010s, like there was more of us and there were more rights coming around to it, but like it wasn't definitely widely accepted, let alone like bisexuality, the gender non-binary people and all that. That was all like just still very touch and go, I felt like almost. So the
Oh
time I
yeah.
was so like but then we go to 8 years later. And then that was like, well, and really quick. So then on the 90s thing, I feel like we're like cool now, right? Because I came out as trans and then like my family kind of embraced that. But like 8 year difference. And all of a sudden, like, I feel like, honestly, I feel like being a queer millennial is like, we like really went through some stuff. Like, you know what I mean? Now we're like the
We really
coolest.
did.
We did. And now we're emotionally adjusted because of it. But like, we're also like, no, I've been through that. I'm very comfortable now. Thank you. You know?
Well, no, the fact that we went through a domestic large scale terrorist attack, we went through gay marriage being illegal to being legal, we went through Pulse, we went through COVID, we went
Hmm.
through the recession and dealing with that as people, because the recession happened right as we were becoming adults, right? So it
Yeah.
was like everyone told us our whole lives, you're going to grow up, you're going to get a house, it's going to be wonderful. And then the second we turned 18, it was like, nobody's ever getting a house again.
You can barely afford gas. You think you're gonna get a house?
We were like our whole lives are a lie. So now I feel like us as millennials, and especially as queer millennials, we had to shift so many times the life that we thought we were going to have. My partner always said when he was younger, he just resigned himself to the fact that he was never going to be able to get married. He was never going to be able to have kids. He was just going to be a guy in the world. And so when gay marriage became legal, he said that he went through this whole shift in his psyche and his mentality of, I didn't know this was even freaking possible. And I think
Hmm.
that that's the story of a lot of queer millennials, is that we've shifted so many lifetimes in this short 30 to 40 year period
Oh
where
yeah.
we've been like 12 different people.
Well, and I tell people, I tell my staff this a lot. I'm like, once you overcome like one societal norm, the rest of them are just kind of dominoes. Like,
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny to me that people make those jokes about, oh, this is the future that liberals want. Exactly. Yes. You
Mhm.
say that like it's a bad thing. We
Oh,
want a
absolutely.
future where everyone can be with it. If somebody wants to walk, somebody's like, they're going to be walking down the street dressed like a pony. Okay. If they
Yep.
want to walk down the street dressed like a pony,
As
look
long
the
as they're
other, like,
modest about it for children, they
what
can dress like whatever animal they want,
correct. Correct.
Like,
Yes. It's this weird thing where I don't think that American mainstream society has caught up with the aspects of being a human being and having a human experience,
mm,
right? It's become very regimented. You go to work, you pay your bills, you become a productive member of society. And I think that's ingrained in so many, especially the flyover states kind of mentality, that people forget that we're like human beings, and life is meant to be lived and to be enjoyed, and not just work a 9 to 5. And sorry, I'm going way off tangent, but I'm
no,
having
I
like
love
a
it.
I had this weird kind of, it wasn't a therapy session, but I was in like this leadership workshop yesterday, and the speaker was talking about how you view the world is how you will always approach the world. And that kind of shook me, because I've always said that I'm a survivor. I've survived a lot of things, right? So when
Hmm.
I heard that, I was kind of taken aback and made a little sad, because I realized that how I view the world is something to survive. So how I approach the world is through a thought of survival, not
Hmm.
a how do I enjoy the world, it's how do I survive the world. And I think that that blew my mind, and it
Yeah, I
sent me
love
into like
that.
this deep sent me into a deep spiral. And I was like, I look at every situation, I walk into a room, I don't think what fun things am I going to get into. I think, okay, who looks like they have a gun, where are the exits? That's how
Hmm.
where my mind goes. And so it's how I always approach the world, is through a lens of survival, because I'm waiting for the next shoe to drop or for the rug to come out from under me. And I think that that is definitely part of the problem with American society, is that we all have certain views of the world, and we think that our view is the correct one, and therefore we conflict with each other. And I say, oh, James, just because you view the world in a different way, therefore we can't be friends, we can't, live
Hmm.
co-peacefully in a society. I'm going way off topic, I'm so
No, you're
sorry.
great. No, you're
um,
good.
but it's making me think about all these things, right? So but I just feel it makes me feel so bad for trans people, because they have this weird experience where they've watched everyone else in their life get more equal rights over time, and yet they're still stagnant and being held back. And that's for the same reasons that the other people were held back, that they're no longer held back for. And it
Hmm.
seems redundant. It seems so what is the word Madonna used for Gaga? It seems so reductive. It seems so
That's
reductive.
terrible. Sorry, I don't.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean, right? Like,
but here's my thing with that. So I guess like so for me, especially because again it's kind of a new identity for me. I think as we get more exposure, because we just exist more now. We do. And that's kind of the whole reason I talk about it in comedy because I truly believe the more exposure and the more representation that trans people can have, the more people are going to even pay attention to what rights like we deserve. Because I will tell you, I'm a lot of people's first. I get that all the time in Indiana.
well, don't say deserve. I mean, all people deserve basic human rights, and the
Oh,
right
absolutely.
to,
I think that
you
people
know,
don't, I just don't think people recognize people until they know them. You know what I mean? Like, I know it sounds
yeah.
terrible, but like, I just, like, even I love my family. I do. I think if it wasn't for the fact that I have a trans cousin and myself, there would be no queer people in my family, first of all. So, like, there would be no reason to even pay attention to LGBTQ. We all live in either flyover states or conservative states, minus my Aunt Mary, who lives in Chicago and Colorado. She lives both places. But that's the thing. Like, at the end of the day, I could have just not been exposed to queer people. That would have been an option if I wasn't myself. And my cousin wasn't himself either. But that's where I'm saying, like, I think that's where it gets scary to me because even before I did comedy, before I did any type of advocacy work, I didn't really have a lot of gay friends either. So then I didn't know what the view was of trans people because I assumed it was like the rest of the world. Did we even count in that? Like it's kind of scary sometimes because you don't know who's going to consider you a person or who's not. Because obviously there's the ugly side of being trans too. I am fortunate enough to not have to run into that a whole lot in my surroundings. I've never during stand up, I should say, I should knock on wood when I say this too. But I think that like I would be so scared if someone was upset with me because I had talked about being transgender on stage. That has not happened to me yet. The only times it's really been confrontational, it's been so passive and by people who aren't going to do anything about it. They just don't like me. And I'm like, well, you don't have to like me, like,
Yeah,
and
not
that's
everyone's gonna
also
like
because I'm a
everybody.
Sagittarius. But I mean, other than that, like,
No, I think it's funny to me when you say, well, there's more of us. When I hear that a lot, and that's a huge talking point, but it's not that there's more of trans people or more gay people. It's that people are finally more comfortable to be open about it, right?
mhm.
And it's like, I'm watching that new FX, that new Ryan Murphy show about Aaron Hernandez. And,
Oh yeah.
he had so much in his head about being gay and
Hmm.
how much that screwed him up, right? I mean, that wasn't the main, like all the causes. There were multiple factors, but it's still funny to me that, like, I mean, it's showing like how hard he fought to hide it from the outside world. But we're talking about like the 2010s. Like, this wasn't
Hmm.
30, 40 years ago. This was a few years ago. This was after the invention of YouTube. There were
Yes.
still adults fully hiding who they are because they were terrified to come out in this type of society. Even now, I know that there's a few people that have come out in sports and entertainment, but it's still not it's still not thought of as like safe to do so, right?
Well, I think that also shows like as much as we all live in the same world, we're all not like in the same part of the world, right? So like Aaron Hernandez was also had a surrounding that was obviously very unsupportive, and that's really scary. But also, it's
Mm-hmm.
like I I like to think as we get more awareness of these things that like there's better support systems being built for that scenario. And again, Aaron Hernandez, like you said, there was so many things feeding
So
into
many
that.
factors. Yeah,
Yeah,
so many
like
factors.
oh my gosh, like that's and
Brain
so
damage.
right. I mean, and, oh man, and then CTE is a whole thing. But I think that when it comes to things just as simple as, do you have a supportive environment? Because I will say that's something I talk about on stage too. If I didn't have the family I do have, because again, they just had a lot of questions, right? And that was easier than them rejecting me. Because I can answer questions or I can Google things as easy as the next person. But like, I think like there are people who I don't know. I would hope that they at least have the friends or the comedy community or whatever they have to come out to and be themselves in that window at the very least. But I think it takes finding that. And again, I think Aaron maybe or other people have had like their little circuits that they can be out with, but but maybe it's just not possible because of, safety and all of that. But
So
that's
when you were 20, you said you were 20, right? What how did your family, your parents initially take you saying that you were attracted to girls?
22. So
22.
my dad really had to take some time with it. That was really confusing for him. Um, and I had
Walk me
just
through how
finished.
you told them.
Well, I made it a whole dramatic event. I got
Well, that's what
everybody
we
in the
do.
same room. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, well, I'm going to get attention for this. Good or bad. Um, but I invited my sister and my little brother was away at college at the time. And then he like went away for like 1 year. But I told him ahead of time, and it didn't surprise him at all. And then my little brother's like my best friend too, though. But I had my older brother and my sister and my parents in the room, and I was very blunt about it. I was like, I'm dating a woman. I think I like women. I think that's the direction this is going. Da, da. And then my older brother totally read the room wrong and goes, well, obviously, we love you and we support you. And we're always going to be behind you 100%. And I knew that my sister agreed with him because her and I had talked before too. And she looks at Ash and just is like, look at your parents. And then my mom's a different person nowadays, but my mom was raised Jehovah's Witness. And where she did leave the church when I was really young, there's a lot of stuff that was still ingrained there, out of fear, out of really a lot out of fear. Because I think in her mind there that was still a thing. And then she went through like a reawakening a few years later, and that's where her and I are better now. But at the time, she considered me sick, like ill. And we had a lot of rough years. And it was really hard, and especially there was a lot of non-communication, on both our parts. I'm not going to pretend I was the emotionally mature one in the relationship. I
Well,
was,
you shouldn't have to be. You're the child.
well, I think that I always hold myself to a degree now, especially because that's what's helped me get through a lot of hard stuff, and that's that
Okay.
I'm going to make sure that I have the mindset of my survival is important, and that includes me mentally and physically. And so nowadays, I think I would have approached it different by the sense I would have just given her space and not interacted with it as much. Um, Whereas I kind of kept forcing myself to go to these family things I knew she didn't want me at the time. And I think that that made it harder for us to really grow and come back, because I wasn't, I was so very cocky about myself, and I was like, and then when I came out, okay, so then a few years later go by, and then she finds out that her whole religion's a sham because she reads a book. Um,
What
and
book?
I don't know, I've got to look it up, but it's one where someone of like the elders from the Jehovah's Witness come out and they're like, it's such a scam. There's so much money that goes to
I
this,
think
this,
I
and
heard
this.
about that.
Yeah, it shook my mom and my aunt's like whole world. Now they had left the church again, but like they needed that fear taken from them. And so she reads
Mm.
this book and she realizes, oh, like what I believed was God is not what I believe is God anymore. And then now her real beliefs are God has more love for people. And I don't know if it's necessarily even a God, but a higher being for her now. But that changed her mentality towards me too. So she actually found out I was transgender from somebody else. Um, and then cornered me about it a little bit. She was like, "Hey, I want you to come over and I want to talk." And I was like, she knows." So, but she was selling a house to like a friend of my brother's, and my brothers always refer to me as their brother or he. They're very, very good about that, but I hadn't told them yet, my parents. So my mom was like, I think I've taken things wrong in the past, and that's why you're not telling me something right now. But I just want to know if there's something that you want to tell me. So I told her, and then she cried. I didn't because I'm numb. That's not on purpose. I'm on testosterone, and I literally only cry at Marvel movies. Um, that's like the
Oh,
best way I could
yeah.
put it. And like, yeah, or like, dogs when their owners come home after being gone for a long time, that also makes me cry. But like actual things I'm involved in, I can't do it. It's like so
What was the source of her tears? Was it
I think she was really
did she,
sorry. And
mm,
and I will admit too, it wasn't until recently that I forgave her. So I was still just mad at everything she did. And I was
did
like
she
always,
ask for forgiveness? Did she apologize?
she
No.
apologized. She did not ask for forgiveness. She said, I'm sorry. But there was no, I need you to forgive me in that. It was, I want you to know that I feel terrible that I've lost what could have been
Mm,
a relationship with you. Because I did.
yeah.
I marked a very clear boundary where I did not want her around me. And
Sure.
every now and then, I'm not saying me and my mom are best friends by any means now. I think that we are getting to know each other again. Um, and I think that she's so much better now that she doesn't have the weight of like this like fake religion that was just pushed on her as a child. She went through a lot of like isolation as a kid. So like she's like just starting to kind of like refigure out how to really honestly socialize with people in a way that's less negative. I know it sounds crazy, but that's like her whole thing now. And that's really
Some
turned our
people need that. some
Oh yeah.
people like have to go to therapy for that because that's kind of how they were conditioned and groomed, is to be, look at things through a negative lens and be critical, and that's very difficult.
Oh yeah. That's the other thing too, is at this point I'm just hoping that keeps going. So I'm trying not to be a source of negativity that would lead her to going back the other direction. But really, like, again, how it started and how it is now, it's just a total 180.
That's really good to hear. It's good to
Hmm.
hear. I mean, obviously I wish that hadn't happened to begin with, but everything we go through shapes us as people, especially queer people.
Hmm.
So for you and your comedy, what is the goal for you? Is it something that you enjoy, or do you want to make something bigger out of it?
Oh, I always want to go bigger. I produce a show now because I was trying to kind of get some of that under my wings. I'm involved with this kind of top secret project, but it's going to be kind of like a speakeasy comedy club in Noblesville.
Ooh.
It's gonna be really cool. You're gonna have to come on. It's gonna be awesome. I'm super excited about it, and I'm working with some comedians who are like my favorite people in the scene. They're also queer, and then just really talented people in like multiple ways. Because you know how like I'm a comedian. I'm not a magician. I'm not a stage performer by any means. I am a good storyteller, but that goes with the comedy thing. But there's so many people who have so many other talents that are involved with this that like I don't know. I think I always want to go bigger. I'm currently writing my special. I'm hoping to record next year because I finally have like a solid 45 minutes to an hour set, depending on like, how, and I don't know. I think that my goal is always to keep going bigger in comedy. I think I will always have a Peter Parker and a Spider-Man life for a while, because that's just the truth. And I will have to have a day job and I will have to be Spider-Man at night. But that's great.
Your goal is to not have a day job, right?
Oh yeah, if I could be Spider-Man all the time, I would. But at the end of the day, like the whole thing is you have to be Peter Parker to be Spider-Man because something has to pay for you to be Spider-Man. Um,
Sure. Yeah. I kind of view it as like the whole Superman thing, where it's like,
mhm.
have you ever seen the movie Kill Bill?
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's one of my favorite movies. But I love when Bill was explaining like the whole Superman thing about like when he goes to work, he's still Superman. The whole facade that at work, that was the facade,
Hmm.
right? And I kind of feel the same way about like my comedy and my daytime job, where it's like when I go to my daytime job, that's not Superman, that's my Clark Kent. That's my Clark Kent.
Absolutely. That's
And
my
then
Peter
when I
Parker.
when I come to my other stuff, my entertainment, my comedy, and my music and stuff, that's the real me. That's the
Hmm.
Superman, right? And I think that's a big struggle for a lot of entertainers, and especially us. We live in Indiana, in the middle of BFE, and this podcast will probably have like 10 listeners, and but um do you think that the pandemic played kind of a part? I always felt like the comedy was starting to grow to more of a thing, and then the pandemic hit and it just annihilated the local scene.
Oh, I actually disagree. I think the local
Really?
scene
Okay.
is awesome right now. I also am like a main part of the local scene, so maybe that's also why I think that. But like, yeah, it's
Sure.
so fun to book a show right now. It's fun to do open mics. Now, that being said, I am picky about where I do my work, right? So like there are two mics I will actually hit regularly that I like, and then the rest of it, I get booked enough now where I can kind of test it through that. But really, honestly, especially now that I am stronger in my material as a trans person, and I feel like, we talk about educating and entertaining in the same sentence, right? Um, that's my goal always. And I feel like the more I get around to even like college towns, the more I feel like I'm expanding. And so I feel like the local scene is great, but also the local scene is getting better at networking. Especially like I don't know if you've ever gone to the Sunday show, but I do have to give a tip to that really quick because that's a huge networking event almost. That's where all of us go to hang out. I every now and then I can catch someone to book them really quick. But also like I get booked there. I meet people from out of town. Oh, last year I did this thing called the Midwest Queer Comedy Festival run by Dwayne Duke. I don't know if you've ever met him out of Columbus. No, he's out of
No.
Columbus. He's out of Cleveland. So He's trying to throw it again. He didn't get to throw in this year because something fell through with his event space. So he's trying to do it again next year. So I'll keep you posted because that's one you definitely want to do. Because
Yeah.
I made a ton of friends there. And it's like, I think that's how our scene's going to keep growing though. As long as it's like, as long as you keep coming back and you keep networking, talking, like that's our scene breathes now. I don't feel like it used to breathe, and also there used to be a lot of bad attitudes in it. Um, but even like I feel like some of those bad attitudes that used to really intimidate me have come a long way since COVID, where like you said, we go through so much stuff, and at the end of the day, we're all just people trying to survive and make something funny, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that the recent past couple years doing your comedy and networking, do you think that that has changed with how the scene is changing? That's a really weird question,
No,
but
I
I'm
think
trying to
no.
say,
I think I will also say because I had to take a brief hiatus from comedy. I went through a really rough relationship where there was just a lot of jealousy on their end, and so I had to kind of not do mics and things because I was constantly accused of cheating. Um, I really couldn't do anything, honestly, on my own. But now my current relationship, she kind of gets that I'm gonna be at open mics, a couple nights a week, or I'm gonna have shows most nights, and I'm not like in. So it's like she knows I'm not cheating. Like I don't know, it's just different. And so it's
sure.
like, so once I was free of my old relationship, I just really decided if I'm gonna go back into comedy, I'm going to hit it really hard. So I did. I started going to downtown Ollie's has a really great open mic, and it was the first one I did when I came back
Oh,
to comedy, and that was 2021, I want to say. Because I was doing like shows. Sears used to do shows at that grill, Joe's Grill. But that was all I was doing for a little while because that was the only place where I wasn't suspected of cheating. So, but then I really came back and started hitting it hard, and I started booking more shows, and then I started producing my own show, and I feel like a comedian now far more than I did before the pandemic, and I think also like I understand the game better now. So I will say it could have changed, but I also couldn't tell you because I was not doing a very good job before.
do you find it hard to balance all of that? Because I'll say that I'll be a man and I'll be a man and I'll admit that I find it hard to balance sometimes. I go to two different colleges for two different degrees. I work full time. I try to do my podcasts and writing and stand up, and then also try to find time to give attention to my partner, which I'm not very great at. So it's like I struggle with that. Do you struggle with that?
More recently, yes, because, well, okay, again, the great thing is my girlfriend is a former performer. She's a former ballet dancer. So she understands that sometimes it's just that's your schedule, that's your regiment, because you are trying to do a thousand things. Like I've started doing more like different kinds of shows too, right? So like all of a sudden, any given day of the week, I might be in a show. It used to be pretty much Friday or Saturday, and so like my schedule gets like that. But then she knows we can turn pretty much anything into a date night. I don't know. I will say that. I don't know what it is about me and her chemistry, but like it's that like we'll go to my show and then we'll like one time we just went to the Chatterbox and listened to jazz music all night.
Oh,
Um,
love that.
Oh my God, it
Love
was so
that.
great. It was so, and it was just the right romance, right? Right amount. But I think, yeah, I think that I will, here's what it is. And I get this compliment all the time from her, so I don't know why I didn't think about it. It is so easy to sneak romance into our lives because of how long it took. She was my best friend before we got together. And for the longest time, I was like, wouldn't it be crazy if I ended up with her? I thought it was impossible because she identifies as a straight woman. Still to this day, us living in the same home, she identifies as a straight woman. But I thought there was just, I remember looking over, we worked at Starbucks together. I looked over at her on Cold Bar and I thought, wouldn't that be crazy? If I ended up with her. Wouldn't that just be absolutely nuts if I got out of my whole life and I ended up with her? And then, like, I think it was like probably 4 months after I had broken up with my ex and I had like taken some time to like get back on my feet because I had to find a new car, I had to find a new home, I had to make sure my dog was fed, like, all the things after you break up with no plan. Um, and I don't know. It's just always been so comfortable and easy to be with her. And there's never an expectation that I can't meet because she understands, she knew who I was before all this started. So, like, I don't know. I will say, because she was my best friend and she knows who I am and loves all the silly things about me, even the stuff I don't like about myself, it makes it so easy to just insert the love we have for each other and the time we can give each other.
So you're a Sagittarius. What's her sign?
She's an Aquarius.
Okay. Okay, nice. So when it comes to performing, I wanted to ask this and I
Mhm.
forgot. Do you do you still get nervous? Okay, me neither. And
Yeah.
I've always been told by people that that's a bad thing, but I don't think it's a bad thing.
No,
Like
because
people
we're
told
both
me
happy
you
because of
should.
this, Luke.
Well, it's like I don't know. It's like I feel like I was nervous when I was younger because I felt like I had so much riding on it, right? Like I felt like I have to do this and I have to be this and I have to impress people and all these things. And there's been a lot of me over the past couple of years that part of me has died, that has given a crap what people think about me.
I think
Like
I very died.
obviously I have to get people to like me to do entertainment. Like that's
Yeah.
part of the job description, right? But at the end of the day, I feel so comfortable and confident and the humor that I like and the things that I say that even if nobody else laughs in the audience, which I mean, that never really happens, people laugh, but
Yeah.
even if they don't, I'm still proud of like the jokes that I come up with. I'm like, there are times when I'm in the shower and I'm writing jokes in my head and I'm like, that is the funniest joke that anyone has said about anything ever. And it makes me so laugh. I do have to say, I did this joke one time. It was like 2016, and I did this joke that nobody laughed at, but to me, it's one of the funniest things in the whole world. And I was talking about Jesus and I was talking about Veggie Tales. And I said, which is, they're talking vegetables. And I said, that's so ridiculous. I think that Jesus actually does not like talking vegetables. Jesus does not like talking vegetables. Just ask Terry Chavo. And nobody laughed. And I thought that was the funniest thing I ever come up with. Um, I don't know. I don't.
Really,
Nobody laughed,
Bravo. I haven't thought about
and
that in
so
so long.
that's such a niche
Oh yeah.
joke, and I don't know why nobody laughed at it, but I thought it was the funniest thing. I laughed at that in my head. I still laugh at that in my head. I think that is the stupidest. I
So
love,
stupid.
you know. So I don't get nervous anymore when
Uh-uh.
I literally used to have to take a Xanax before every show because
Oh,
I was that nervous,
I'm
and
not
now
taking
it's
it
just
now.
like now it's like somebody will message me and be like, you want to do a show tomorrow? And I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. And I'll just go up on stage. And there are times, the last show that I did, they asked me for new material and they asked me to come perform it the day after. And so I just had a day. And I
Yeah.
used to legit like practice daily for like 2 weeks leading up to a show, like the whole set.
Well, you used to do a whole song and dance though, which I feel like does require more rehearsal than just like stand up, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I haven't done any more songs just because it they I feel like they just didn't get perceived as well. It's
I will tell
very
you, my brothers still talk about condoms are a boy's best friend. Like whenever they're like, oh, because we'll be in a group saying they'll be like, "What's James comedy like?" They're like, "Well, this one show we went to," and like condoms are a boy's best friend is like always got it, and they always talk about the sequin jacket you were wearing that night.
Yes, I still have that sequin jacket and no, I don't. I returned that sequin
I would say,
jacket.
I
I
thought you
kept
returned it.
did. I kept I so what I did is I liked it so much that I bought a dupe, like a knockoff. So it's
Hmm.
not as cute, but it was I forget if I told you that jacket was $180. And so I'm not going to
Sequins are
keep.
expensive.
They are. So I got a dupe from Wish and it was like $20, but doesn't fit as well. But no, I always worry because somebody at some point was like, you should always be a little nervous before you go on stage, otherwise you're not going to be your best. And I'm like, I feel like I'm at my best when I'm not nervous at all. Like when I'm just,
No, I'm at the best and I'm
you
at like the
know,
top of my energy and I'm not if I'm nervous. And but I also will say
yeah.
like it's like you said, someone says, "Can you do a show tomorrow?" My next question is, "How much time is it?" Because then, yeah, I can write a set by tomorrow. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I've got, and then you know how joke writing is. I'll just put this all together, done. You know what I mean? So like nowadays, like, yeah, but I guess I haven't been nervous since like I was first doing open mics, and I was like, that was when my moment was during open mics, and it's like I don't think I've there has been one show I've been nervous about in the last 2 years that I can say I was nervous, and that was the show for Bob the Drag Queen because that
Uh,
sold out Helium 2 nights in a row. And I was like, I had never performed in front of a crowd that large before. But when I tell you the bottom and top were sold out both nights, I was like, oh my God.
how do you, this is going to sound like such a rookie question, but how do you go about getting those types of gigs?
Oh my gosh. So, well, it's now Nick. He used to be the assistant manager. Now he's the general manager. Before it was Avery Dillinger. And I saw that Bob the Drag Queen was coming, and I love their stand up. I don't know much. I learned more about their music later after I got the gig, but I think their stand up is so funny. Sorry, it's so funny. I think it is
Yeah.
so silly, and it's so like it works in a like really weird reflexive way of my comedy too. So I went to Avery with like almost like a presentation in my head of why I needed to be on this show. So I went to first of all I showed up. I don't know if you've ever met Atlantis. She usually works in the box office in the administration. I went to her and I was like, "Hey, do you know if Avery has someone for Bob?" And she goes, "No." She goes, "But you should talk to him anyway." And I said, "Well, I don't want to bother him." She goes, "James Avery, you leave me your email address right now and you tell me." And she goes, "And I'm going to tell him to contact you." So at first, Avery's like, "I think they're bringing their own opener, but I'll let you know." And then, like, a month before they're supposed to come through, Avery messages me and says, "You need to send me your tape. I need to send it to Bob's people." And I was like, they're gonna watch my stuff. So I got like 3 different clips that I'm like super proud of together, and I sent it to Avery. And then I had to wait a whole week for this man to get back to me. And then he told me, "You're gonna open 20 minutes, Bob the Drag Queen," and I was ecstatic. But also, like when I tell you, then I got to meet Bob the Drag Queen, which I was like, so I was a fan, and then by the time I actually got to meet her and got to listen to some more music, I was like a gay boy fan. So I was like so stoked. And then and I again 2 sold out nights, and I love a queer crowd. Queer crowds eat all of my shit up because transgender stuff does not surprise them at all. So like I just it was so yeah. So really the thing about is if you see something you really want at a comedy club that you have any now the other thing is to stay familiar with the staff, right? Avery knew who I was. Avery knows I can deliver. But I'd only done the small room at that point. I'd only done the upstairs room. So like but the important thing is to stay available, to keep going to open mics, and then when you see something you really want, I think persistence is the goal. I think if you show that I'm going to put the energy into this show and I'm going to be what you want on there, they will hear you out, and that's usually when they'll ask for a video if they need one. Also, some of them come through and know us well enough to pick one, and then some people be like River Butcher came through, um, and then for that one, I think they were just like James kind of looks like River. And then they threw on Aisha the comedian because she's solid with every single crowd there is. She's just very adaptable. So yeah, I think like it's really about persistence and knowing like, hey, I can do this. I want to do this.
Well, I think that's also just good general life advice
This is
is,
true.
going after what you want. When I talked to Sears, Sears said, all these incredible things happen to me. And I was like, it just feels like you're super lucky. And Sears was like, look, I'm not lucky. I show up. I just put myself out there and things happen when I put myself out there. And I think that's just really good advice, but it's also something I struggle with because I'm a Cancer. So I love the safety of my shell and staying inside my little box here and not putting myself out there. Not because I'm worried of rejection, more of like I just dislike being uncomfortable.
I relate to, but that's also why I stopped being a girl. So
Yeah. It's really weird to be as RuPaul says that he's an introvert masquerading as an extrovert, and I
Hmm.
feel like a lot. Like when sometimes when people talk to me, I was like, you can go out and make more friends, and they're like, I can't make friends. I'm not like you. I'm not a social butterfly, and I'm like, "Uh, people think I'm a social
You're
butterfly.
selling
I
it.
was
You're
like,
selling it
I
well.
like,
That's what that
I like,
means.
I don't look at me. I should be an actor. Like, oh my god, like people think that I'm actually like a person that does things when really I just sit here and watch TikTok. Like,
Like,
right. So when you're coming up with your comedy, what is your process of your writing?
honestly, a lot of I do a lot of testing one-liners on people. Like if I think something funny, I'll say it several times. Like a recent tag I keep throwing at people when they misgender me is it's fine. I have a high-pitched voice and I'm adorable. It's gonna happen the rest of my life. And then what else? I don't just things like that. Like you just kind of keep going. Like I just always throw tags out, but then after that, it's like I have a lot of like bits that are stories, and every time I tell them if I throw in something new I like, I immediately have to write it down and rebuild and restructure, and then I'm always trying to see how can I make this a fluid story that calls back to itself more than once, so that way at the end it can all call back to each other. Those are my favorite kinds of specials. So the one I'm currently writing, that's been the focus. Is like, does this call back to this? Does this call back to this?
Yeah, interesting. Do you I don't know if it's just my style, but my style is like I take all the jokes I've written and I figure out how to put them in a chronological order that makes it a flow. Do
Hmm.
you do that or do you jump around with your stories?
I definitely don't do a chronological order thing because I feel like it kind of goes a little bit all over the place. Because even when I'm talking about growing up, I go from like me then, me now, me then, me now, me then. So I guess it's kind of like more of like a tennis court thing with that.
Oh, okay. Like a volley. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you participated in any roasts?
I want to, but like I think people think I'm too sweet. Like I don't get invited to roast people. They're like, James is so nice and we don't want to hurt his feelings, but like I'm born in the 90s. I can handle it all, you know?
Well, like I love roasts and I've been asked a couple times now to do a roast and I've turned it down because I don't know why I'm afraid. I The problem is that I'm really good at delivery with like insults, but not to somebody that I don't really know. Like when it's my partner, like
Yeah.
I'm very quick to be like, well, that's why you talk real slow because you ride the short bus. Like I'm very quick with like insulting him. But and I don't feel bad about it because
Oh,
that's my humor.
yeah.
But with how do I worry so much, especially these days with the whole cancel culture and, you know, how am I going to, I feel bad about making race jokes or making female jokes or um, mentally handicapped jokes. Like I, I struggle with that. So I feel like it's this, I don't know, man. I feel like for a really good roaster, that has to be your brand. Like your brand has to be like cutting or,
And you have
making
to
fun
like
of people all the time.
yeah,
But
and you have to be okay being perceived as you know what I mean? You have to be okay with
right,
that.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm more, my comedy is based off of this bubbly personality and kind of thing. And
Yeah. That's why we would
it's
need to roast each other. It'd be more of a honey roast, but it's like, you know what I mean? Like, but I think
yeah,
that's
I
the
don't
thing. I think you need to pick. I think that's where you have to be really decisive with who's roasting who, right? Like me and I don't know if you ever met Mariah Davison, but she's a
know.
lesbian, and we always joke that like we're like enemies, but we're like not. We're really good friends. But it's always like a joke, like we should roast each other because we roast each other so well. But she's probably the only person I roast that well because I know like I can say something like, "You don't know how to do that. Are you even a lesbian?" Like things like that. Like it's just like a lot of things like or like I'll brag that I was a better lesbian and I'm really a guy. Like it's just silly things like that. Where like, but again, that's someone who I know knows I'm not. I know when she says stuff, she's not being mean to me either. But you have to be
Yeah,
okay
but
with like sitting in that
yeah, I
space.
also feel like you truly have to know someone to really
Hmm.
roast them. Like, I don't want to show up with a pre-prepared set of jokes that are interchangeable for anybody. I feel
Hmm.
like for a really good roast, you have to really, it has to truly be about them, right? And
Hmm.
I think that's why I'm so good at it with my partner because I've known him for so long, and it's so easy for me to dig and roast in those things. But with somebody I don't know, I don't just want to show up and just be like, yeah, your mama's so fat that she stepped on a quarter and turned it into $1.50. Like
Yeah, but like if they have their sets online, you can roast their comedy. I'll live. That's fair game, and that's
a
usually what I do if I
little.
don't know someone. I'm like, I could probably roast your stand up or anything else I find about you online. You know?
Yeah, I just feel like it has to be like super intentional. And also I struggle with like bull crap. Like my comedy, while I do have this certain kind of affect on stage where I'm like, look at me, I'm a gay man.
Hmm.
Like it's also like true, like my stuff is not fake. Like I have like this joke about people that um people that think that being gay is a choice, which is weird because why would you choose men? Like and I say like women are like smell great and they're smart and they're funny and they're beautiful, and I'm like my husband hasn't unloaded the dishwasher in 3 months, and it's like yeah that's funny, but it's also true. Like
Hmm.
my comedy comes from like the truth, so it's really hard for me to just come up with random stabbing comedy that I don't necessarily believe in just for the sake of it. You know what I mean? I don't know. I struggle with that.
No, you're good.
Anyhow, so James, where can people find you online? Where can they come see a show? How can they get more of you?
Find me on Instagram or Facebook. And it's at It's All Fun and James Till. And literally
It's
any,
all fun and James Till.
yeah.
Okay.
And literally on like all social media, that's my handle. So you can find me on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook under those. My TikTok is just like really rough clips of me doing comedy, but my Instagram has my schedule usually on it.
Okay. And what is the future for you? What do you got coming up?
I produce a show called Kaboom Pow at the end of every month at Tappers, the arcade bar in Fountain Square. And then I'm like a featured performer at the White Rabbit. So I do a lot of stuff there. And we have our Dead Comics party coming up, which if you haven't signed up for that, you should text me later. But that's on Halloween this year. So that'll be at the White Rabbit, which will be really fun.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. Well, James, thank you so much for joining us. And I love you. I think you're amazing
I
and,
love
and
you.
such a fun spirit. And I appreciate your contributions and your thoughts. For all of our listeners, if you're not watching this on YouTube, please make sure to follow. You can find us on YouTube, and we will see you next time. Always remember that anyone can be an icon, but it takes somebody with a heart to be a legend. Thanks for joining. We'll talk to you later. Bye.